Welcome, Internet. Today we're going to be talking about melancholia, a French psychiatric particularity. So, before we begin, I think it's a good idea to make a distinction between the common word usage of melancholia and the French psychiatric usage of the word. So, in the common usage, we often use it more or less interchangeably with depression, i.e., there's a loss of affect, there's an apathy, there's a sense of hopelessness, a sense of despair, a sense of not going forward, a feeling of powerlessness. And even though all of those elements are present in the French psychiatric version of it, they're not limited to that. Because what that means in French psychiatry, basically, it's very severe depression with psychotic elements. So how does it manifest? Well, often people suffering from melancholia in the psychiatric way will basically feel that they are worthless. So basically, they will feel that they have no worth or self-identity, nothing worthwhile within themselves, as if their ego was no good at all, like as if all the good parts were gone or never there in the first place to begin with. They might blame themselves for sins that they have nothing to do with. So this is where the delusional aspect comes in. For example, a patient watching TV and seeing a car crash in a far distant land might say, "This is my fault. These people died because I'm so evil that God punished them." And when you're, for example, asking, well, how could it be? Where's the causal link? There is, and might explain it through another set of explanations, but they're always delusional because there's no correlation between them being bad and the people dying on the other land, but they might feel that there is one. They might feel that they're to blame for everything. So this is one example, but some other examples include, for example, blaming themselves for wars, blaming themselves for starvation, blaming themselves for the destruction of the world, for climate change, and so on and so forth. So here there's this very strong feelings of worthlessness, or even worse, they feel that they are completely evil and bad. Often when you interact with these people, you can feel that there is no empathy towards themselves, that they can't empathize because they feel that they themselves are bad, are rotten or evil. They might even feel that they are a burden for anyone interacting with them, including the therapist, but not limited to them. Like they can feel that for family members, for society, for the staff at the hospital, and so on and so forth. So here you have to keep in mind that this is a very severe form of depression in which the person feels that there is no hope for them. And there are delusional elements that make it even worse and harder, because there's that aspect of delusion that will prevent them from basically connecting with themselves and connecting with others. So very fundamentally, they basically don't see the good in themselves. There is no good, there is only the bad. Therefore the good is only external. And they might be more in empathy with your tentatives as a therapist to try and help them, rather than empathy with themselves. So what are the prognosis? Well, this is where it becomes a little complicated. The prognosis for melancholia is bad. It's bad at many levels because, first and foremost, they have a very high suicidality rate. Often they might even sometimes attempt suicide if they're left without surveillance. For example, a relatively famous case in France was that the therapist opened the window just because it was a hot day and just left the patient, not even like a couple of minutes, just a couple of seconds, and the patient ran and held themselves out of the window. In those moments, those people can be incredibly self-destructive, because what is underpinning their behavior is the fact that they feel that once they die or once they commit suicide, all of the evil will be gone. That because they are evil, the only way to save others is to disappear. So that form of self-blame and self-hatred comes in three basic subtypes. So the first subtype is the stuporous subtype, i.e., when these people have no longer the ability to walk, to interact, they have might confused thinking, but these sins are still there, the self-hate, the self-loathing, but there's no more physical ability to act them out, but the ideas are still there within their minds. The anxious form, i.e., where they are afraid of what's going to happen next, when something is going to happen because of them or of the hurt they could create in the world. So therefore, they are very, very afraid, and this is where the suicidality might increase, because fundamentally, it's like if I destroy myself, bad events will stop. Therefore, I have to do it as fast as I can. And the third subtype is basically the delusional subtype proper, i.e., we should rehabilitate the death penalty, but just for me, not for anyone else, for me. And because, again, if I'm dead, everything will turn out okay. So basically, how we try and help these people is through medication and psychotherapy, both of which have not been greatly effective, I must admit. But still, something has to be done because, as I was saying, the suicidality is a very real risk in these cases. So it's no, how can I say, it is absolutely by no means, the suicidality risk is by no means delusional. It is very real, very concrete, and should be taken with adamant seriousness. That doesn't mean that every melancholic patient is going to commit suicide, but that does mean that they're very, very at risk. And the therapist should always keep that in mind when dealing with them. So, because of the severity of the cases, often hospitalization, i.e., going to the hospital or being interned in a psychiatric hospital, might be necessary because of the surveillance needed to protect these people from themselves. Also, what I wanted to add is that, very interestingly enough, Binswanger and other psychiatric phenomenologists tried to explain these phenomena, or at least understand the subjectivity of these people, as them having a moment in which their subjectivity, their relationship with time is frozen, i.e., there's nothing that's going to go forward, everything is blocked, everything is repetition ad nauseum. Therefore, they have to try and break free from that repetition through action and through self-harm and destruction in order to save themselves. Also, we could talk, and I'm going to, about Freud's idea of melancholia, i.e., an identification with a lost object. In the cases of melancholic patients, i.e., a la psychiatric French way, there is that aspect where they're going to identify with something that has been lost. And therefore, there's this strange idea in the phenomenology that shouldn't even be there. That something here is wrong because they're there, and that is wrong. Therefore, there's this sense, this great sense in them of lost, like they've lost something, they have lost themselves, a bit of them. And Freud talks about the object, and I don't know in the sense of melancholia if it's an object or if it's a previous version of themselves that they have lost, and that they, in a way, feel the gap, that loss, when they broke down into psychosis, that they've lost a part of themselves, the part which was non-psychotic, and that basically, that being gone, that they can't reach a level in which they're going to be able to basically bring it back. And there's a hopelessness, basically, as if that version of themselves was terribly gone. We can also make the parallel with the false self of Winnicott, because basically Winnicott explains that in the more severe forms of false self, there might be, the true self might be lost, and that true self lost is basically going to force the false self into a massive uproar of self-destruction in order to destroy itself and to be reborn as the true self. So, unfortunately, this is a fantasy, right? You're not reborn as the true self. But these people might feel that the facade, the false self that they have in this delusional moment could be destroyed, and they could be reborn properly, or cured, or free from the quote-unquote bad parts. Unfortunately, It doesn't work like that. The melancholia is one of the hardest psychiatric disorders to deal with, to treat, because of the extreme suicidality and because the patient themselves don't believe in any innate goodness on their part. So basically, the whole process is to try and create a relationship with them that will stabilize their psyche at least long enough for them to be able to get in touch with good elements of their personality. What I'm saying here is very theoretical, right? We're not talking about an easy task, but that might be a therapeutic goal, to try and make them connect with that lost self or try and rebuild it. And also through the empathetic gaze of the therapist, be able to build a relationship in which they can maybe, through the eyes of the therapist side, and basically have and develop empathy for them and for who they are. So very fundamentally, this disorder has to be treated, I think, in a multidisciplinary team with psychiatrists, psychologists, nurses, psychometricians, and so on and so forth. I think that one cannot be just alone with the patient, because the patient needs, I think, many people to take care of them, and people who can be as many anchors in the world, and anchors that can help them fight and try and maintain a sense of self against the delusion, against the self-blame, against the self-hate, and against the psychotic elements that are pressurizing the individual to end their lives. I.e., what I'm saying is that the more support they get, perhaps the more likely they're able to last longer and to fight off the psychotic elements. So basically that was pretty much it for this video. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. I'll see you in the next one.